It's 11:59 at Radio Free America, and this is Uncle Sam with music and the truth until dawn. Right now, I got a few words for some of our brothers and sisters in the occupied zone. The chair is against the wall. The chair is against the wall. John has a long mustache. John has a long mustache. It's 12 o'clock, Americans, another day closer to victory. And for all of you out there on or behind the lines, this is your song.
And welcome, everybody. Let me know if the microphone's working all right. Got the little miniature co-host here. He's very sleepy, so he won't be awake very long. Yep, didn't take very long. So, welcome. Comments if you want. Joined by people who are joining us live and a baby co-host, but really a lot of people are listening to this as a podcast. And I was just going through and a couple of things, looking at the podcast results, I guess, podcast numbers. Now that we're consolidated and all under the Podbean umbrella, we can get a lot more numbers. So welcome to the iHeartRadio listeners who have taken the lead from the iTunes listeners. But it's been interesting to see who and where people are listening to the podcast and which podcasts are the most interesting. That being said, I was also digging back, looking at thumbnails for some reason, and discovered that we had talked about this topic 2 years ago. And it seems like one that comes up a lot, but not one that today's topic at least comes up a lot. But it hasn't been technically touched on in a couple of years, I don't think. So we're going to talk about it again. And for those that are listening, didn't pay attention to the title, we're going to be talking about evaluating your reach, resources, and value as an individual Second Amendment activist. Because a lot of people, what do they say? No single drop thinks it's responsible for the flood. And then there's some other thing that has to do with how many candles does it take to stop the darkness or create light in the darkness. So let's get into this. So if there's anybody out there that wants to chat about any of these things live, feel free to say stuff. Otherwise, I'm going to take a look at what we did 2 years ago, and we probably had would we have been using AIs 2 years ago? Possibly. But essentially what we've got in here is assessing your reach, considering the resources at your disposal, the effectiveness of advocacy, community building, compliance and legal understanding, and then personal development. Look, that was an interesting set of stuff. And what is it complete? Is it everything you need? I don't know. Is it in any kind of order? That's another question. So if anybody wants to dig into any of these specific bullet points, I guess we'll say bullet points, we could do that. But I'm paying for thanks to our Patreons. I'll take a second to say thanks to our Patreons. Down here at the bottom, there's a scroll that says our Patreons make it possible. So we're not looking at the dogs, but our Patreons make it possible for our projects like this. Makes projects like this possible. And we thank them. Because otherwise, I wouldn't be able to take the time to do this kind of stuff. So when we're talking about patrons, one of the things they financially support is a subscription to GPT. And I had started a GPT subscription a while back, and that might be where this comes from. But I don't think it was that long ago, was it? And then I let the subscription slide, and now I've decided to subscribe again because of some of the new features. And they just released something they're calling ChatGPT 40. And I decided, let's put this same question or ponder this same, ask the same question to the new large language model. So essentially, it's just a more current group of more current understanding of everything people have said out there, or a lot of stuff people have said out there, and then it compiles an answer. So we've got using my H+ water bottle, definitely want to use an 8+ water bottle. That's when you're supposed to drink. Is there another water bottle that has a smart app on it? All right, so it says, I asked it how to evaluate your reach, resources, and value as an individual 2A activist. I put the caveat in 2024 on there, and it came up with self-assessment, and then evaluating resource, assessing reach, measuring your impact, planning for growth, and continuous improvement. And I thought that was pretty cool. So we're going to go through those points, and I just thought I probably could have put these things into a what is this thing called? A Substack blog. I'll do that as we kind of speak here, so that there's something for people who are following along on the visual side here to see what's going on. And since I'm posting stuff over on the Substack, thanks to all the people that subscribe over there. We get a continual growth over there. It's pretty neat. And we've even got a paid subscriber over there. And that is super cool. Didn't even know that you could have a paid subscriber over there. So it's not like Patreon so much because you're just supporting the blog portion of it, but if more people participate over there, we'll of course incorporate any paid memberships when we do stuff to say thanks. All right, so we're evaluating our reach, resources, and value as an individual activist in 2024. I think for now I can go ahead and just say that'll work and put that on the screen. And there we go. You don't have to look at a little baby dog sleeping. He's completely passed out already. So he was completely passed out. I came in here and started the show, and then I made him wake up, and then he completely passed out again. So he has the superpower of being able to immediately fall back asleep when he feels like it. Hopefully that's a nice soothing. It's like having a lava lamp at the bottom of the screen. It's like having a nice soothing dog that's passed out at the bottom of the screen. A lot of people say you shouldn't have dogs on these shows. I've been told by people that make more money than me. Uh-oh. Would that wake you up? I can tell you from experience that if you're having a dream, that certainly makes the dream get weird. All right, so how to evaluate your reach, resources, and value as an individual 2A activist in 2024 from GPT, the newest incarnation of paid robots. Because you can go up and ask a robot anything you want, and it'll tell you. But if you pay the robot, it tells you more stuff. It uses a bigger piece of its robot brain. All right, so evaluating your blah, blah, blah. Here's a step-by-step guide so to help you with this evaluation. And here's a special bonus. If you're listening live, I can just go right over to my chat GPT over here and ask it supplemental follow-up questions. It now learns as we have conversations with it. It remembers. And that's a big piece. It never did that before. It was like asking a dumb robot the first time you ever asked it. You have to ask it really specific questions. It's going to be interesting to see how it learns our conversations. It learns to follow our conversations. But the first portion of a 5-step plan is to self-assess. That's always a good idea. Maybe when to self-assess and how often. How to self-assess is probably a good idea too. You know, just being hard on yourself isn't no good, and just patting yourself on the back for no reason isn't any good either. But it says personal knowledge and skills. All right, I've got the hiccups. Personal knowledge and skills. Knowledge of laws. Ensure that you have a thorough understanding of federal, state, and local gun laws. That's a tough one. You know, that's an ongoing one, especially since they keep adding new ones on there. But where would you put that as important? Knowledge that the laws exist is one thing. Knowledge of the terminology of the laws, I don't know. Knowledge of the implications of the laws, I don't know. Right? So knowledge of the laws, advocacy skills, Assess your abilities in public speaking, writing, and debating. Are those advocacy skills? I guess so. Public speaking, writing, and debating. Guess what? Every single one of those is just like walking or driving. You get better and better as you do it. So just like driving, when you first start, you think a lot about it, you put a lot of effort into it, and you really are laying a lot on it. Like it's so difficult. And then you do it for a while and you get you get comfortable with it, I guess is the way. And then you pretty much think when you're fairly new that you've mastered it. And that's when you get in your wrecks, right? And people don't know this until you get old, but after you've imagined anything that you've done for a while, think about walking. When you're first starting to walk, it's a big deal. You don't know about it. You want to walk. You hear the bigger kids are walking or whatever. You start walking. First thing you want to do is run. You can't run yet, so you fall over all the time. Then you figure out how to run, and you run around all the time. Then you figure out, I got other things to do besides run around all the time. So, you know what I'm saying? And then after a while, you figure out, oh, if I run all the time, I got more potential to get in trouble, fall over or whatever, have less time to figure out where I'm going. So we start to walk, and we get pretty good at walking. And it's sort of the same with any skill, I think. So speaking, writing, debating, you're going to do okay with that. Just start doing it, and it's clunky. You put a lot of pressure on yourself to do it, and then you start doing it, you figure out, oh, it's not that big a deal. You're going to get into some wrecks. You're going to screw up. You're going to say some things you shouldn't have or write some things you shouldn't have. You're going to mess up in a debate. So what? Keep going. And then eventually you get to where it's just comfortable. And then hopefully you'll be encouraging the people who are sitting there watching everybody do it to start doing it too, because it's pretty simple. If those are the advocacy skills, then you know what I'm saying? You just got to start doing them. You don't just get advocacy skills because somebody comes down and gives you a bunch of hit points or something. You don't find a magic mushroom and step on it, and then all of a sudden you have public speaking skills. Social media savvy. Evaluate your proficiency in using social media platforms for advocacy. All right. That's pretty interesting because people can have proficiency in social media all day long and they can advocate for advocacy all day long, but it doesn't mean they've mixed the both. And there's no perfect there. If there was, we'd have very successful Second Amendment activists. We have very few, if any, successful Second Amendment activists. We have the most successful of what we got. And we got people who are successful that kind of do it, but we don't have super successful advocates out there. Can we? I don't know. I don't think there's any law against it. They just haven't done it yet. Nobody's tried. All right, so that's what the robot thinks, your personal knowledge and skills portion of the self-assessment are. Next, we get to network and influence, your connections. Consider the strength and extent of your network within the Second Amendment community and beyond. And that's interesting because I don't think your strength means you can go over to somebody's house and have dinner or something. I don't think your strength is like whatever you tell them they do. I don't think strength is just because you know them somehow you wield any kind of influence with them. Strength can be lots of things, right? And then extent to your network. Again, did any of those things apply? Just because you know somebody doesn't mean you're part of their network or you're in their network or they're in your network. And on the other hand, your brothers and sisters can be in your network because they're your brothers and sisters, but they could have no interest in what you're doing, and they're still in your network. So having people in your network is great, and it can be used. Again, you can have a huge family that could give a crap about what you're doing. You're still in their huge family, and you still have obligations to them, and they have some obligations to you, but they're not going to care about every hobby you got, every interest you've got. So I don't want to say that connections and the size of our networks has much to do other than understand what it is, because its significance can be varied from large to small, right? You can have a small group of friends, but if they're the president and the ambassador, that's a pretty important small group of friends. You could have a large group of friends that sit around doing nothing all the time, and a big deal. Like they're about what's the equivalent of that? So next is influence. Assess your influence on social media, in community groups, and through personal interactions. And that's an interesting one because a lot of times we'll get analytics, we'll get metrics to assess our influence, but that's typically in order for marketing or in order to charge, in order to understand if your ad rates have been effective, the stuff that you might be paying. Large size doesn't always come from great messaging. Large size sometimes comes from great advertising. People pay to have their videos succeed. And if you do that correctly, you do that well, for example, you put out 3 different versions of product content, and you put that out to 3 slightly different angles, 3 different approaches, and then you see which approach works the best. And then the next time you do the same thing, you have 3 approaches that are kind of leaning in that one direction, and then you can continue to refine that, and pretty soon you've got a pretty good idea of what sells, how to sell it. And then it doesn't matter so much what you're saying, because you know who to say to what to say to who. And so a lot of times the reach and that kind of stuff can be, it says assessed here, but, can be determined. But again, what's the usefulness of that, and what's the productivity of that? That's a good question. So I think everyone, again, I'm trying to inspire here, not dissuade. So if you're thinking of this and going, oh man, how am I ever going to get to a point where I've got influence in the community? You don't have to have a bunch of people listening to every word you say to have influence. You simply have to be part of the community for someone to go and remember what so-and-so said, or we just had a new point of view put out there from so-and-so. So you don't have to have everyone listen to you to have your point of view recognized and understood. And all you really need is a community that has a lot of people participating. And then what you have, and I've lived through this, it's not necessarily the times we live in today, but there's times when a community participates, the community looks to each other for answers instead of looking to something else for answers. The community can find answers within itself when it has a bunch of people who are good at discovering. So I think their influence isn't necessarily just a numbers game. And often when we're talking about how successful your YouTube channel is, or how successful your company is, or how successful your attempt at marketing has been, it turns into a metrics game, right? And metrics are almost always, I don't know if it's by necessity, but just they're typically focused on money. And if you've made money with your marketing, stop that from falling off the top of the table. All right, so that's the beginning section, self-assessment. And I think the robot did a fairly good job of picking things that are useful for assessment. Is there anything in here under personal knowledge and skills or network and influence that you would add? Or would you add something besides these 2 things or do you add something when you do your self-assessment? Another question to ask would be, or to answer if you want to, and this can be, actually type it out if you're out there listening, or just, when you're thinking about this yourself, is it worth doing what I'm doing? Why am I doing this? How often do you do these self-assessments? Are you even doing these self-assessments? And then again, are you doing them when you're feeling like shit and you're going to pick on yourself? Are you doing them when you just had a win and you're really just patting yourself on the back? Or are you doing them maybe at a scheduled time, so you're going to evaluate no matter what the circumstances are? And you don't have to do any of these, but the people that are getting to where they're getting to go, getting to where they're going, does everybody get where they're going by luck, or do people get where they're going because they thought about it and they created a plan to get there, and then they did things along the way to assess that they're on the way to that goal? When you're doing land navigation, there's a reason land navigation is important, besides the fact that when we get down to it, if you can't walk around the planet Earth by the things that are available to us, the shadows and the running of water and the sunlight and things, if you can't figure out how to walk around on a ball with your feet and your eyeballs, then and it gets very useless in whether or not you have a GPS or not. So the same kind of thing with when you're out there creating and doing stuff and interacting, right? Like what are you using for your navigation? What are you using for to catch your bearings? All right, I'm kind of rambling, so I'm bringing in check here. We're at 20 minutes. I think we're doing pretty good since we have like 5 sections here. I'll just quickly say thanks to the people that are joining us live and saying hey out there. Richard's out there from another country, I believe, or are you here now? I'm messing things up and you're here now. Then we got Foss, then AR Patriots out there also. Thank you. People that does Richard host shows? I know you're in a lot of shows, but Foss and Patriot, hosts of shows, thank you very much for being part of the community that we speak of, creating, so to speak, the community that we're talking about. All right, so first we did self-assessment, and now we're going to evaluate our resources. I think that resources are something that people don't get enough basic understanding when you're young about resources. And I think that's one of the reasons we budget poorly and we just, we do things in dumb order or we prioritize things foolishly. And that's, when we don't think of things as pragmatically. Is that the way to say it? So anyway, evaluating resources. Let's see. It's got 3 sections in here. Financial resources, time commitment, and support systems. So first we'll get into financial resources. Your budget. Determine how much money you can allocate towards your activism. Well, I tell you what, if I would have been given advice or getting advice back in the beginning, I would have definitely yelled this one to the room a bunch of times because I definitely did this one poorly. Then you got fundraising. Assess your ability to raise funds through donations, events, or crowdfunding. And again, I'm going to put a big exclamation point behind that one because we're capitalists. We live in a country full of people that are interesting and entrepreneurial, or interested and entrepreneurial and participatory. So there's lots of ways that we can have fun fundraising, creating things out of nothing together. Instead of the other dynamic would be 2 other dynamics would be that, or 3 other dynamics would be that the state creates it for us. So the state takes a bunch of money from people and decides the things that we need and creates them, often with a lot of waste and, focus on things that aren't necessary. And then we have we can wait around for a rich person to come around and decide it's interesting and do it. And then we have their version of it. Sometimes that's interesting, but, and then I guess the 4th option would be do nothing, never do anything, just sit around wishing everything would happen. So the fundraising thing is, I don't want to say critical, but it's certainly an opportunity that gets discouraged and gets downplayed by people that are from all sides that don't understand the potential and the power of it. And then it gets abused. So then, of course, there's people that are sad and sorry and they get all worried about anytime anybody talks about it because they've been either abused by that or fear that. All right, then we get into time commitment, which, is time money? Money is time, right? But time commitment, availability, evaluate how much time you can dedicate to your activism on a daily, weekly, or monthly basis. And that might be one way to determine your, that first section, when you determine your self-assessment of it. Are you spending the amount of time you wanted to? Are you getting to spend enough time with your activism, or are you devoting too much time to it, I guess? Then I guess you would also want to say the time spent on it. You can spend all kinds of time doing nothing, spinning your wheels, right? A bunch of time wasting everybody else's time, a bunch of time just, I don't know, repeating everybody or something. So make sure that your time is useful, perhaps, too. But this is evaluating your resources portion of evaluating your reach, resources, and value. Then the next one is support systems. Volunteers. Consider the availability and reliability of volunteers to help with your initiatives. And that's interesting. Nothing is really done alone. We always have somebody else helping us, either overtly or in behind the scenes, or voluntarily or involuntarily, right? So having people who volunteer to participate, I already mentioned that's a big piece of this, and we're talking about community here. to some extent. So doing things that are creating projects that have other aspects, that have larger, more working pieces than can be done with one person. That's interesting. I guess there are other things out there that people are doing single-handedly that everybody else is just watching. I guess there's probably a couple of projects I can think of like that. I mean, obviously there's very, very few, probably nothing that's actually a single person, but some of them kind of project that they're a single person or whatever. They're like a single entity that's kind of has the microphone or something. Like here, this little animal does all the work behind the scenes, and that's why he's so tired all the time. I just sit here and read the script. For people that are listening, this is the sound of a blubber dog being patted. You might think that somebody's kneading a thing of dough, bread dough. Nope, it's a big fat animal. All right, back to time commitment, availability, and then we'll move on, I guess, to support systems. No, we were already in support systems. Sorry, we were talking about volunteers. Next, we'll talk about allies and partners. Identify other organizations or individuals who share your goals and can collaborate with you. Well, it's certainly possible and more probable with individuals. Organizations, I mean, I don't want to be pessimistic. I'm trying to be optimistic whenever I can, but our organizations don't have any history, don't seem to have much interest in working with each other until it suits them to team up, or they're standing next to each other and both doing the same thing and don't want to look like they're both wasting money on the same thing. So they act like they're teaming up on it. You know, when they're teaming up on stuff, do they mean they both spend $24, or does it mean only one of them spent $24, or they both spent $12 on the $24 lawsuit? You know, like what happened here? Like, how do they team up? They both sent lawyers at $100 an hour to watch the thing happen, or you know, one of them sent lawyers, and the other one heard the report, so that they saved some money. You know, how did they work together? We don't know. Let's see. We know that whenever they work together, they want more money, though, right? We know that part of it. Assess your reach. So one of the things I asked the computer is this: evaluate your reach, because of course, as content creators, I think we think in terms of reach quite a bit. And again, since we don't have a lot of money going forth here, it's not like somebody has to pay to have their Second Amendment rights, and we made it cheaper. You know, our efforts having effect, right? Are they, and how big is that effect, I guess? I've started drinking seltzer water. For anybody that's interested, generic seltzer water, which tastes pretty good, actually. It's just like drinking unflavored soda, but it turns out it dries your mouth out. So I'm guessing the CO2 bubbles are actually drying my mouth out more than the water part. I'll have to get a different blend of it so that I have more water than CO2 or something. But it's pretty good, except for the part that it dries your mouth out when you're talking, I'm discovering. Let's see. So audience analysis. We got demographics. Let's see. So we're talking assess our reach, I guess I'll say. We have two sections in here: audience analysis and communication channels. This one, I didn't proofread this. I just started digging into it. I let the robots go, and then we either agree with the robots or we have issue with the robots. This part, I'm not sure what's happening. Dang, Krabby's throwing $5 at us. You know what happens when people throw $5 at us? Sorry, but this was what happens. There's a lot of people who won't like this portion of the show because they hate animals. They hate dogs in particular, and they don't like mixing dogs with 2A. But on this show, when somebody throws a super chat in here, we get, in this case, a Zesty Paws probiotic bite for gut health. So not only is this a special treat for him, but we're helping improve his gut. Mentioned earlier, he's got a big fat gut. Look, his guts are so fat that his tongue can't even fit in his own body. So we're going to give him one of these biscuits. It turns out he wanted to eat the biscuit. All right, so there you go. Now, I don't know what happened. Is she sick? But the other dog has definitely heard this dog eat a biscuit at this point. The house isn't that big. Is she even in the house? Are you in the house? Hey. I guess that other dog's off the biscuits. She feels that she has good enough gut health and she doesn't want a biscuit. Is she even here? Hey. Hey. Dang it, she probably ran away again. Hold on. What are you doing? You sick? Oh, come here. Come here. Maybe she doesn't like these biscuits. It's not a good sign for these biscuits. Do you want to eat this biscuit? Oh, as soon as she figured out it's a biscuit, she was interested and she ate one. I don't know. She's moody. She's a very moody animal. She's got issues. But anyway, so thanks for the super chat very much. And yeah, both the critters got their biscuits. This dog is a little jealous that Mello also got a biscuit, but I would say he's going to work on that, but he's not going to work on that. He's just always going to be jealous that any other dog gets a biscuit that he could have ate. It's just the way he is. It's his nature. It's a very greedy animal, just when it comes to food, though, and pettings and attention. All right, so we're getting back to, oh, well, hold on. Doing all right there, guy? You going to be able to swallow that ever? Oh, as soon as I bring the camera back, he starts being gross. You be all right? All right. Now, go be gross in the corner. All right, so we're going to assess the reach with audience analysis and communication channels. So, all right. Okay, I guess I get that. Like how many people are you reaching, and then how are you reaching them? That's the way I'm going to, right? So with demographics and engagement metrics, they're saying demographics, to understand demographics of your current audience. Sounds good. You're going to assess your reach by understanding engagement metrics to use social media analytics to evaluate your likes and shares and comments and follower growth. I guess I dig that. So they're saying that, our audiences are important because, we're saying stuff for a reason, hopefully. We're not just saying, well, I understand the people that want to say stuff for the record, right? There's people that want to just make sure that there's information out there. Investigative reporters aren't looking for headlines, right? But then there's headline reporters that understand most people are trained that they're supposed to listen to whatever sensationalist shit. So there's those headline writers and the headline, what's the word for that? I guess just writers, reporters, headline reporters that are only going to ever report on, headline type of shit. So I think we do have, well, there's a place for both of them. I don't know if we have a need for both of them. So anyway, digging into it, understanding your current audience is interesting and useful. For right now, it's super frustrating having dozens of people listening live on multiple channels, and there's only like a handful of people that chat. It's even worse when you get a bunch of people listening on all kinds of podcast platforms and then very little feedback. At least when I kind of came into this whole thing, I was putting stuff online from about 97 to 2009. So for maybe whatever that is, a couple of years, 12 years, where we're putting stuff online and getting some amount of feedback. And then starting in 2009 up until now, up until maybe the last couple of years, there's been a lot of immediate feedback, a lot of live shows. So coming back from live, this seems really slow. This seems really clunky and old-fashioned to wait for an email or to wait for something to go live and then wait for comments to come in. It's just not the same. It's not, I don't want to say intimate. It's just that it's not as urgent. Like if somebody's having a conversation, blah, 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 I think this, I think that. The live commenter can say, I think a third thing. And now the conversation can turn and the conversation can get more nuanced because of that input from that live viewer, where a comment coming in 2 weeks later is interesting. It's just never going to have that impact. So for those people that are listening live and don't participate, yeah, you're the one not doing the impact that you have, which is immediate. But anyway, I think that's one of my issues is that we don't have that live audience anymore. We have people that are more spectatorish, so they're just watching instead of participating. It's kind of like when you go into movie theaters with a bunch of kids, then they're going to be yelling at the movie and making noises and doing whatever. You go into a movie theater with a bunch of old people, they're just sitting there sleeping probably. All right, so assess your reach. The demographics and engagement metrics. Use social media analytics to evaluate likes, shares, and comments. I would say there's way more to it than this, but for the sake of moving on, we'll move on. If anybody ever wants to have a conversation about specific things that we bring up on these Tuesday workshops, that's what it's all about. To poke some things, but not necessarily to get down into the weeds, but we can. And especially if you've got a specific thing, one, we can use it as a learning indicator, an example, or if it's something private or unique or something, we can take it off here and just work on your specific thing if you're interested. Let's see. Then we've got the communication channels, your online presence and your offline presence. So your online presence, assess your reach across different platforms. And then they just have a bunch of platforms suggested here. All right. And then your offline presence, consider your visibility in local communities through events, meetings, and public appearances. So that's interesting. I would say that there's more than that. There's your social presence, which I think is what this first section is, what they're calling online. You've got a social, the people that do pay attention to whatever it is, Twitter, Instagram, whatever. YouTube is a little tougher, and it's like saying following the news or something. Then you've got what they're calling offline presence. I would say is like your persistent presence, because you've got I've seen that guy before, and then you've got I watch this guy. I like think of somebody who's a consistent guest on other people's shows or is a consistent expert for a specific issue. Those are persistent presences. And so you got I think there's more nuance to this one for sure. And then as far as your offline, or what they're like your IRL, your real life presence, that's, I don't want to say few and far between, but I think that's just not focused on. So I'm not sure how big a deal that is. We certainly could use that more, especially when it comes to election years and people being boots on the ground during election years. Like that would be one to focus on and to shine light on. Imagine if we had a channel that just showed light on the good things. So we have a lot, and I was just calling them headline chaser and headline reporters, right? People that understand by looking at the metrics what has sold. So they just do more of that. They just do more of the same. And they don't care what way it goes. If it's red or blue or up or down or left or right, they don't care. Whatever sells at the moment, that's what they're doing. And they don't care if it changes. So the reason they're constantly looking is because they're looking to make sure they're always on point. So whatever the point is, they'll just react. But then you got people who want to either drive or champion a position, a direction, a position. And so you've got that. And I think whatever we do is either working towards that, right? Or just out there being random. And that's something else when you're assessing your reach. If you can be going for growth, you can be going for audience size, you can be going for better audience retention in a video. There's so many things you could be going for with the analytics, but then there's also that thing, a non-metric that you can also be paying attention to, which is, if it's having an effect. All right, so maybe that's the next one, measuring impact. Maybe I should shut up and go to the next one. So the next one is measuring impact, and we've got quantitative metrics and qualitative metrics. We'll start with quantitative, so things that can be counted versus things that have a quality that can't be counted. Is that the way I say it? So growth metrics and engagement metrics under quantitative metrics. We can track, so under growth metrics, they're saying track the growth of your audience funds raised, and number of events held. That's interesting. Like the number of times you've done something. So that's interesting. You might be able to get something that happened. I don't know. Like you could do a daily show. You could do it, not a daily show. Nobody's doing that. You could do a weekly show. You could do a monthly show or something, and feel frustrated because their audience isn't growing. But the fact that you did those shows, are you giving yourself credit for that? Like the number of events held is a big deal. That's a lot of experience, and it's a lot of waypoints that can't be removed. Like once you've done something, it exists, and nobody can say that gun owners aren't. If you're if you're getting out there and let's just champion an amazing effort, champion suicide every Saturday afternoon, suicide awareness and mental health, right? Mental health awareness and suicide prevention, I guess I should say, every Saturday, right? The fact that isn't growing as fast as somebody might want, or getting the reach that somebody might want, the fact that it exists is a massive quantitative metric that often doesn't get the importance, the magnitude, or the acknowledgement for the magnitude it has. I mean, that's what I said. Think about how long you've been paying attention and how many entities have been there the whole time. How many variations? How many variations of the same show have you seen come and go? There's a couple of shows that have probably been there as long as you've been doing stuff. There's probably a couple of channels that are still there. But unless they're engines with, crews and making money behind it, and they've got a financial interest in doing it over and over and over, how many of them that are doing valuable, useful, important stuff? How many of them that are contributing directly and not, being paid to participate? But how many of those have come and gone? So I'm using that not to be doom and gloom, but to say, give massive credit to the people that are out there putting the time in for very low return, other than the fact that it exists, and they're not getting huge and they're not raising funds necessarily. That might not be their focus, of course. Their goal, of course, is not to do that, but it's very difficult to continue doing things when those aren't even on the table. Let's see, engagement metrics measure interactions on social media and attendance at events. And that can be a double-edged sword. Every time you see something grow, it's awesome. But then if it doesn't maintain growth, that can be frustrating. So understand that things fluctuate in their cycles, and it's super difficult to understand cycles until you've lived through a few of them. Because, you start something, a business, a journey, project, whatever, right? And you're going to have some ups and downs and ups and downs and ups and downs and ups and downs. And eventually you get to where you hoped you'd start, and you got there. And then what do? Do you quit? Do you start over? Do you keep going? That's a hurdle. Did you plan for that? So now you make that decision and you push forward, right? You either kept going, or you started over, or you did something. And then guess what? You either started over and you got to that same point again. Did you plan for it this time? Or you kept going, and guess what? It all is going to come around and come around. So you're going to have ups and downs, and you're going to have people come and go, and you're going to find yourself at these places where you go, oh my goodness, I just got done with another cycle. Now I know what they're talking about when they say these things are cyclic. And you don't see these cycles until you're in them. And I don't know how old you are, but think about them. And, it's a tough one to measure. So the attendance of these things, what are you comparing that to? Comparing it to what you wish it was, comparing it to what somebody else's was, comparing it to what it was last year. So, did you have the same people last year? So again, I'm not here to pat you on the back and say everything you do is amazing, but at the same time, you can't be saying I've done nothing decent. Like I didn't do anything good, because if you did something, you did something. If you're doing something, you're doing something. Let's see, qualitative metrics. So the quality of the metrics, maybe, I don't know what this one means. You got feedback and you got success stories. So collect for feedback. They say collect feedback from your audience and peers through surveys, comments, and direct conversations. That's interesting. I need to take a moment to suggest, or to let people who might be listening to this know, no, there's not like a giant loaf of stinky cheese off gassing this is the little puppy has now decided to fall asleep completely, and it's just making this little snory noise next to me over here. I don't know if the microphone's picking that up or not, but I feel like I've got sounds like a horse is sleeping next to me. Maybe it's just the way his angle of himself is. Okay, so we've got the collecting feedback from your audience through surveys, comments, and direct conversations. Yeah, I wouldn't say that today because we got over dozens of people, like dozens and dozens technically of people watching and very little feedback. Then I've gone to shows where we got like 8 people and we're just having a good old time because we all know each other. We're having a massive conversation. So sometimes it's the environment, sometimes it's the what's the word? Like the tradition. And I think what we're experiencing is just a phase change, maybe, of audience, where audiences that had been the let's talk in the audience, let's participate, let's be part of the crowd, have moved on, and that'll happen. And then you've got people who, if they don't see people having conversations or doing a lot of feedback in the comments and no one's asking for it, you end up with audiences, just people, spectators, I guess, just watching. So that'll change. And it's not like it's one or the other one's better than the other, because trust me, it gets pretty. The reason we built gun channels is because it got so bad with people just being horrible in the comments. There was a time when it was such a big thing to have conversations going, I guess, in the comments section, that people got real worried about it and like real defensive, and literally I'm pretty sure people shopped out where to hang out because of the amount of time they could get on the comments. It was crazy. It was a big part of people's experience, and maybe that had to do with we were watching it on computers back then, and now people are watching it on phones. Who knows? There's probably multiple pieces to it, but whatever it is, we're seeing a change in the and just as a podcast, how do you have feedback from a podcast? I mean, it can happen, especially if you encourage it, if you ask for it, or if you encourage it by offering something, in return for it. But it's going to be slow. Like you have to create the product, a comment, like the piece of content. It has to go out. It has to be absorbed, and then the person has to comment, and then even there's a lag when the person comments and it shows up in your whatever feed. There might be a lag there by the system, and just by the servers involved. So there's just going to be some kind of different amount of pace. That's the right word I'm looking for. In the feedback from live conversations of the 2000s, the mid 20s. I'm gonna call it the feedback from the 10s is never going to be the same as maybe it'll be different, but anyway. So you got your feedback. Then we'll get to success stories. Document instances where your activism led to tangible changes, such as policy shifts or increased community support. Well, that's certainly interesting, and I would hope that everyone can experience this. I mean, that would be neat, but I think it might be unrealistic. Tangible changes for sure is possible, but policy shifts, I'm not sure about that, unless your focus is on attempting to shift policy, and then increase community support. I think that's possible. I guess the policy shift one I hesitate on. It'd be great, but I don't know if I'm going to use that as a measure. Hopefully we just have a lack of policy going forward, so you can't measure that, so I'd probably leave that one out. But the robots know what's best for us, so they left it in here. But what do you think? Tangible changes. I'm guessing that means, in conversations. I like to think of, again, Brooke's project on Saturdays, having a consistent conversation every weekend about mental health awareness and suicide prevention. I mean, I never would have thought. I can pretty much say, unless I screw it up, I can pretty much say mental health awareness and suicide prevention as a plugin. It's like a copy and paste. It's in my head. I know that when I need to put that in there, I can just say mental health awareness and suicide prevention, or some version of that, because I've said it so many times. With Brooke not doing that, would I've ever decided that was a great phrase, or even if I thought, hey, that's important for me to start using it, would I have had it so concise? And it's not like I came up with that. Obviously, I've heard her say it a million times, and over other people saying it, and that's just the way I decided to say it. So I think that what's tangible is subtle. Maybe that's the way to say it. So don't expect that to be yelled from rooftops or something. I guess that's why they're saying it's qualitative. It's going to be tougher to qualify. Is that the way you say it? All right. Getting to section 5, planning for growth. This is awesome. So we asked the robot how to evaluate your reach, resources, and value as an individual Second Amendment activist in 2024. And I'm glad that it brought this one up here. And from what we wrote in the one 2 years ago, this is different. This was an addition. I wonder why my internet's going bad. I'm paying good money for internet. Come on, man. Is it disconnecting? I'm getting a bad internet signal. Should have good internet now. Anyway, plan for growth. Set goals, develop strategies. Goals are super important, right? So they say short-term goals, define what you want to achieve in the next 6 to 12 months. Long-term goals, outline your vision for the next 2 to 5 years. There was a time when there was quite a few interviews happening. I would say the 2020 era there, and a year or two ahead of it and after. Not so much anymore because people have kind of calmed down on it, but there was a time there when the activists were activated and people were interested in them, and there was quite a few interviews. And one of the things I like to ask whenever I hear an interview that's interesting to me, especially on a project that I hope will last for a long time, I'll ask them, if they're accepting questions like that, I'll ask something like, what's your 5-year, 10-year goals or outlooks or something like that? Where do you see the company in 5 years, 10 years? Where do you see the organization? And hopefully you're doing that for yourself too, because again, you can have a lot of fun just sailing around or rowing around or floating around in a boat. You can catch a lot of fish that way, and you can just really enjoy yourself. You're definitely going to pay as much for that boat for that 5 years of floating around that you would have paid for that boat if you would have been going somewhere for 5 years. And if you would have been going somewhere for 5 years in a boat, how many times would you go around to planet Earth? It only takes 40 days in a balloon, so it probably takes like 10 days in a boat. I have no idea. But I'm just saying, if you've got a goal in mind and you spend 6 years getting to that goal, even if it's the toughest goal ever and it took you 6 years to get there, that's something compared to spending 6 months, 6 years, whatever, just floating around, just doing, just being another person out there floating around. When you think about the bigger picture, we're talking about Second Amendment advocacy here and the implications and the potentials for it ultimately, right? Is it better to have a bunch of boats floating around that people have to decide, is this boat going somewhere? Is this boat just on a weekend 3-day adventure? Like, what's going on? Is this boat here for the long haul? If you've got a bunch of boats that are all set out in different, destinations, we're going here, we're going here, we're on a 6-year adventure to this, we're on a 2-week adventure to this. It's just a different scenario. So, where is your projects, where are your efforts in the big picture when someone's going to the TV guide of Second Amendment stuff? Are you a little dot that's on a path to something? Or are you a little ping pong ball that's bouncing all over the place? Or are you just a little thing swirling around, doing nothing, a little thing caught in a vortex, or just randomly a little feather in the wind? And you're allowed to do whatever you want in this free country. I'm not saying we should have all of one or all of none of the other or something like that. But where are you, you're deciding what you're putting down. You're deciding what your projects are. You're deciding what you're doing for the people that are out there. What are you competing against, and what are they doing? Again, if you've got a whole bunch of people that have got destinations and goals, we have a couple of them out there. We know people that call their shots and they point at them and they say, this is where I'm going. And then there's people that don't have the courage or the gumption to even do that because they know they couldn't, so they don't. And they just make it, just float around. I don't know. you can, I'll shut up about that. So then you got your develop strategies, content strategy, plan your content for social media, blogs, and newsletters. That's a nice thing. There's, it's good and bad about social. A lot of the social, in fact, a lot of the social that does the best or has the best results are the socials that let you schedule. They're the socials that let you create content now in batches and set them out. And that is for multiple reasons. One is because it makes it possible to not be tied to your project, which is not possible. I mean, if you had to, I don't know, do anything that you had to do every part of it yourself, you'd get very little of it done, or you wouldn't do it at all. So understanding that everything is modular, everything gets done by multiple people with pieces and puzzles and stuff. The overall efforts that we have to do as content creators, if you're babysitting your socials, you're babysitting your socials, and you'll just be a social babysitter for your entire thing. You might get really good at it, and you might be the best social media babysitter out there, but a social media babysitter isn't doing everything else. They're tied to their socials. They're literally the babysitter. They have to be there next to their socials, otherwise their socials suffer. So you can have different approach to that, where you schedule things, and typically the most successful things are just clinical. They're just out there dropping their posts, and everybody else is just watching, and they don't care because that works for them. It doesn't really make a community all that awesome. It's just, place thing out there dropping stuff, but there's a spectrum there, and there's somewhere in there's a good happy medium for everybody. But you can schedule that stuff, and you can schedule it and supplement. You can schedule stuff. I certainly do this in my projects, is schedule things that are, I don't know, rigid or solid or there that you can schedule, and then supplement. Hey, the dog was farted today, or look at the dog doesn't smell so much today, or whatever. Just something for the day you can post, but you can also have those scheduled things in there. So massive potential there for content strategy on the socials. Same with blogs and newsletters, of course, because you have to schedule. You literally write those and schedule them. But then there's also, I'm just going to take a second and go, there's the decision to do that. And just because you can do something, just because it's possible, big whoop. If you're not putting it into your, I don't know, schedule, into your list of things that you're going to accomplish, into your plan, then it's just another potential. So, when we're sitting here evaluating our reaches and our resources and our value, are we doing everything we can? Have we done everything we could? And are we doing it as effectively as we could, or could we adjust something? And I think that's an easy one to adjust. And it's as simple as doing something small, maybe taking a big video and chopping it up into shorts, and then scheduling those shorts. And now those shorts are going to work for you throughout whatever time frame, a month, a week, whatever. And you've already done the content. You've added a little bit more editing time to your project. But going forward, if you realize that strategy works, maybe you'll incorporate some opportunities for shorts in your future videos, and you'll do those at a specific time during your show or something that makes it easier to edit them out. And now it just becomes a very quick addition to your editing tasks, and now you get a bigger return on it, and maybe a return on a different platform, like a TikTok or a Twitter or something that uses a more short format, vertical type of thing than your wide format, long form video that you spent all your time on. Okay, so moving on, event strategy. Organize events such as workshop, rallies, and meetups. How different would it be if we had a community full of people doing this instead of just going to other people's workshops, rallies, and meetups? Obviously, we can't have a meetup or a rally every day, but we can definitely have virtual stuff all the time. And we do better when things are in competition. So suggesting that we only need one of something, or that, we have enough of them, is weak sauce. Start making more interesting things. We certainly need more different kind of shoots out there. and opportunities to get people around guns, normalize guns. And people, I think, depending on who's listening right now, you've probably seen events that got championed by creators who other creators would have ignored or did ignore. And all kinds of situations happen when you create possibilities. So events and real life things. There's whole organizations that don't like rallies, so you won't see them ever bring up rallies. Does that mean rallies aren't effective or useful? Well, I don't know. What would happen if we had rallies again? I'll move on to the partnership strategy. Build alliances with other organizations and influencers. Give it a shot. It can't hurt, but more often than not, it's a beneficial thing. And even if it doesn't last long, you can both learn from it. And it's always a good idea to see how other people work and how they put things together, what they value and how they, how they do. So I don't know about the influencers part, but the organizations for sure. Other creators, maybe. We're not really talking about influencers here, I don't think. Continuous improvement is the last section that the computers gave us when I asked them about how to evaluate your reach, resources, and value as a Second Amendment activist in 2024. And I kind of like the idea of continuous improvement also, in addition to planning for growth, right? Because a plan for growth is like saying, hey, I'm going to do something. Like, again, I'm going to go float around in a boat. Why don't I go to that island over there? Or why don't I try going across the lake? Or why don't I try going down the river? As opposed to I'm just going to go float around in the boat for a little while. Because then you can say, I'm going to go further down the river. I'm going to go back and forth across the lake, right? You can do stuff when you create a goal. But continuous improvement is more than just the goal. Because, again, you can either make the goal or not make the goal, but improvement is kind of irregardless of that. It breaks it down into education and training and adapt and evolve. I'm a big fan of that last one. So we'll do the education and training. Stay informed. Keep up with the latest developments in gun laws and 2A rights. Well, that's stupid. So it just repeated itself with one of the weakest points. Probably because the robot is trying desperately to be anti-gun, even though it's not technically anti-gun. But there's a lot of anti-gun people. I wouldn't be surprised if there's anti-gun people in what's the word? Like messing with trying to teach the AIs. But I mean, they're probably getting paid to 8 hours a day to train the AIs to be anti-gun. I would be very surprised if they're not paying that, because the AIs are pretty anti-gun, and they don't need to be. Anyway, skill development. Continuously improve your advocacy skills. And then it says through workshops and training sessions. So whatever. It would be awesome if this wasn't the only workshop. Tell me there's another workshop out there. Tell me there's somebody else who does a Second Amendment activist workshop besides this one. And I'm not going to stop doing it. I'm just going to be appreciative. But how come we don't have a workshop branch of every single Second Amendment organization? Because I don't care what the organization is. Whatever they're doing should be emulated in another place for another reason, right? Whatever effort they're doing contributes to not just the results of their effort, but because they've done it, they can contribute to how it got done. We need to be workshopping. We have way too few people from the Air Force or any kind of special operations, because the reason that the people who do things to precision are able to do it at precision level is not because they're better or they do anything magic. I shouldn't say it's not because they're better, because they're better, but they're better because, not because of magic, but because they just evaluate what they've done. And whenever they make a mistake, they work on it till they don't make that mistake again. And then they discover the next mistake that can happen. And they don't have a foolish idea that they can't make mistakes. So they're intimately familiar with their performance so that they can evaluate it and not make any mistakes again. And sometimes the mistakes are inherent in the system. They're not a fault of an individual, and you have to get past ego and shit to get to that. So anyway, it would be awesome if there was other workshops out there, but there's not that I'm aware of. So make one. Whatever it is that I'm missing here, do it. I mean, there's tons of stuff. I'm just shooting arrows out here at stuff. Give me feedback if I'm missing the target with these arrows. I'm not aware of everything. I don't have skills in every aspect, but if I don't, I can bring somebody in here, and if I have some skills in it, I can at least talk about it so that we can get this stuff on the table. But I was going to say, continuously improve your advocacy skills, period, just by doing stuff. You don't have to go to some workshop or training sessions. They don't exist. Continually improve your advocacy skills, period. Like, end of sentence. Just keep doing it. Like, there is no way to do it. The way to do it is to go do it, and do it in your way, right? Hopefully the rest of this was talking about, whether or not you feel you're doing it the way you want, or if you feel it's time for a change or a different direction, but do it. And then the last piece, adapt and evolve. I'm all about adaptation and evolution. So it says feedback loop and innovation. So feedback loop, regularly review feedback and adjust your strategies accordingly. If you can't do that, if you're not willing to do that, then you're just, you're a one-trick pony. No need to do that. It's not a successful strategy. Look at game theory. The game theory, essentially, lots of different ways to break down interactions. And they do this for all kinds of reasons. But whenever you look, every time I've looked at game theory, the strategies that evaluate, or at least have mechanisms for evaluation, mechanisms for change, succeed. Anything that uses the same thing over and over, the one trick pony strategy, never works. It can have success. It's like saying tic-tac-toe. If you always chose heads or you always chose tails, you'll have success, but you'll never win. So there's not a trick to win tic-tac-toe, but as you get more complicated systems, more complicated games, so to speak, you can find strategies that will succeed way beyond. And most of the most successful strategies can adapt. So get used to adapting. Find if you're the type of person, for whatever reason, you're super concrete, you don't like the idea of change or adaptation, try little things, if you just to experiment and to see if this is correct or if it works for you. But it could be little things from if you tie your shoe on your left foot first all the time, just stop that habit and break it and tie the shoe on your right foot first, or try tucking in your shoes or tucking in your jacket before you do something else. Just change some little habit, and that can let you know if you're able to get this, and you see the value in kind of checking your assumptions, or you're checking your the things that you're not evaluating. And then innovation, explore new methods and technologies to enhance your reach and impact. We live in the time of AI. That's not only to say, did you even know what AI was 3 years ago? Nobody did. We heard about it in some movie or something, but we're living with it now, and it's all over the place. Like, it's seriously getting everywhere. It's hard to find places where it hasn't gotten into somewhere. And some of that is because everybody wants to see the latest new thing, but some of it is because there's a lot of people out there selling it. But some of it is, or a lot of it is, because it does offer new things, the same way that calculators did, the same way that cars did. So we will have times of innovation. The internet, we all are using it. We're all taking it for granted right now. Some of us are old enough to have lived before there was such a thing, and then through its clunky beginnings, and now, as wherever we're at now, we all think it's super fast and high speed. We ain't seen nothing yet, right? What the hell are we thinking? It's like, it's crazy, going to be way faster. Whatever we think we got today, go look at a flip phone, right? Go look at a brick phone. What are we thinking? Like, come on, we're going to have magic holograms dancing in our eyeballs or something pretty soon. So whatever's next, as Second Amendment activists, we want to be waiting around for that. I don't think we need to try every new trend, but if we don't have somebody trying every new trend, we're failing. So get used to exploring new things. Don't waste your time on everything, but encourage those who are able to, explore drones, or explore 3D printers, or explore, whatever, the different branches of stuff. Offer support and interest, and where we can, we'll incorporate that stuff and we'll use those in the collaborative nature to improve everything. All right. Well, we haven't had much comments in a while, and I'm guessing that people are not listening anymore. So we'll wrap this one up. It says, by following these steps, you can effectively evaluate and enhance your reach, resources, and value. I don't know. Let me know if that actually did it or not. I thought it did a pretty good job of touching some aspects of evaluation. And we're talking about a fairly organic, is that the right word? Like a fairly the thing without boundaries, right? We're talking about a thing that has a lot of angles to it, a lot of ways to approach it. So to have something to start with, I guess, again, or another way to approach this after a few years, I think it did a pretty good job. We'll wrap this one up. We'll say thanks for everybody who's been listening on the live. If you've been listening as a podcast, we appreciate it. Like I say, the iHeartRadio has recently overtaken the iTunes, and iTunes pretty much had been, whenever we didn't have all the numbers kind of all together, and I'd have to go look at all the numbers. I always kind of suspected iTunes was always the top. I mean, even though I didn't verify it all the time, it tended to be towards the top. And I was never sure if that's because we somehow market better on Apple, or there's fewer other things to listen to on Apple or something, or what that's about. But it is interesting to see iHeartRadio has taken the lead, because that's probably the one I have the least experience with. Although I hear it a lot. One of the radio stations out here must be owned by it or something, because they talk about it all the time. So I've been aware of iHeartRadio, but I haven't really used it. But it's interesting to hear that, or see, I guess, that the people listening to the show are on iHeartRadio. Now, as I say this, it'll take time for this video to become a podcast, and then that podcast to be aired. So whenever you're listening to this, and then whenever you listen to it after the fact, right? So it's going to be much later than when this went live. So it's probably changed by then. But I'll encourage everyone who's listening to a podcast out there to leave us some feedback. It does help more than you can imagine with the logarithms or the systems, the mechanisms, so to speak, underneath the internet. It helps when people leave comments on the podcast more than anywhere else. I went over and over about how YouTube comments are kind of hand in hand with the videos. Like, it's a very big part of YouTube. And that means that the comments are interesting and helpful, but they're nowhere near as influential or impactful as they can be on the podcast platforms, which rarely get any comments at all. So I guess it's probably like 1,000 to 1. I'm not even kidding. Like 1,000 comments on YouTube are equal to 1 comment on Apple. So if you're interested in being an activist or someone who's interested in helping out the different organizations out there, get over to iTunes, subscribe to a bunch of channels, and leave them some comments. The channels that you appreciate will appreciate those comments. Same goes on iHeartRadio. The same goes on Amazon. I guess that would be Audible, or whatever it's called. But wherever you're listening, we appreciate it. And if you want to come back to the video or come back to our sites or something, or one of the blogs, and let us know where you listen, that's even cooler. And we do appreciate that. All right, with that being said, we'll let everybody get back to it. It's the middle of the day now on a Tuesday when we record this. And yeah, look, the dog's even woke up. We'll throw a quick commercial in here for the store and for a little show you might have heard of on Fridays.
This is Earl Benson reporting from downtown Topeka, where Gizzard Gary is rampaging through the city. Authorities have asked the public to stay indoors. They believe he will tire soon and need a nap. Gizzard Gary can normally be seen on Foul Territory Friday nights at 7 p.m. Central. Wednesday, 8 p.m. for the channel members chat. Stay safe and give him the bird. Earl Benson signing off.
Sir, why are you in Barry's fishing net? He ran right into it. Get your stinking paws off me, you damn dirty apes. First off, that is incredibly rude. You ran straight into Barry's fishing net. It's ruined. How is Barry gonna fish now? I'm just trying to find some patches and some stickers. Well, all you have to do is go to gearwebsites.com and you can find 2A-related stickers and patches. And even if you need web consulting, technology consulting, 3D printing, anything like that, gearwebsites.com. Now, please get out of the net. I'm sorry. Jerk.